Control room, we ready? All righty, here we go. Coming down in 3, 2, 1. We are joined now by Anne Redhead, the late Russell Cartwright's estranged daughter who lives in New York, to discuss her father's mental health challenges over the years and her complicated relationship with him. Anne, thank you for taking the time. What's your first memory of Russell Cartwright, your father, not acting quite right?
So Brian, hi, how are you? Nice to see you. Let me just first start by saying that it's difficult and heartbreaking to navigate through a life with a loved one who suffers from any kind of mental illness. My father, Russell Cartwright, emerged into adulthood with promise of a bright future. He had completed 2 degrees at Harvard, 1 undergrad, 1 graduate in law, became a lawyer in a corporate law firm. He sang in the Harvard Glee Club, played the trumpet, and had a passion for history and Latin. And most importantly, he had a beautiful and loving wife, 2 lovely children. Then in his late 20s, he started exhibiting signs of mental distress. So the first moment that I really internalized that he wasn't right, I was 5 or 6 years old. Russell was hospitalized for several weeks after experiencing a severe mental breakdown. He terrorized me and my mother in the middle of the night. This is a memory that will indelibly be on the back of my brain for the rest of my life. My mother was somehow able to get in touch with her father, who came to the house with the police. He was removed in handcuffs and hospitalized, as I said, for weeks. Upon his return home, he was able to share with us his diagnosis of bipolar depression, and that he was under the care of a psychiatrist, and that he was taking the drug that he was taking at the time was called lithium.
And I would think having a father with mental illness affected your childhood as well. I mean, that sounds like a terrifying night, but what was the overall impact on you and your family, do you think?
Well, the overall impact based on his behavior, which was most of the time unpredictable and some of the time volatile. There was really no way of knowing Brian in a social situation, whether it be with a friend or a neighbor, how he was going to react if somebody disagreed with him or challenged an opinion or a story that he was telling. So more often than not, he would lash out verbally at the individual, which obviously was humiliating to my entire family. I would say that his behavior hampered our ability to socialize with many people. I think my mother, before she got married, was a very social creature, and this experience hampered and isolated her most of all. But the rest of us obviously were affected because there were just so many incidences of humiliation and embarrassment.
And I trust the family tried to help him work through this. What kind of actions did you take over the years?
Right. So let me just first start by saying that in 1992, after 30 years of marriage and 30 years of oversight, my mother asked for a divorce, and my father sort of unraveled after that. He had sort of controlled his drinking up until that point while he was still married to my mother. But after the divorce, he really became unhinged. He took on an apartment south of us, still in Evanston, but sort of on the border of Evanston and Chicago. And my husband and I stopped by to visit him a couple of times to see him in a disheveled state, disoriented. The apartment was full of people who I had never met in my life. And the whole scene was very, very concerning to me. About a year later, after the divorce, so maybe 6 months to a year later, the Bank of America, who was the trustee of my father's accounts, contacted my mother to let her know that my father was spending a lot of money to the tune of almost $1 million in 6 months to a year, writing checks, buying people cars, handing out cash to strangers. And we obviously were very concerned for his safety. So we found a lawyer. My mother found a lawyer, but we were all present in the process, my brother Chuck, myself, and my mother, to help save him from, because he was in such a vulnerable state, to help save him from people who would take advantage of him and commit undue influence. So we were successful. Through a court order, he was deemed incapacitated to handle his own affairs and was hospitalized for some time.
And that was in the 90s originally.
That was way back in the 90s originally, right? So we made a heroic effort to save him because we loved him. He's our father, right? And that his behavior was extraordinarily disheartening and scary.
But eventually it got to be too much, as I understand it, and you were forced to end your relationship with your father. What precipitated all that?
So I had communication off and on between 1993, really, and 2001. I saw him on occasion. We had a few trips up to Maine together, me and my family, him or he and his wife at the time. I saw him at my brother Chuck's 40th birthday party in Boston. We would speak on the phone intermittently. But in 2001, in October of 2001, early October of 2001, he called me and asked me if he could come out here and visit me and the kids and my husband, obviously. And I asked him at the time on the phone, I said, "Are you feeling well?" Which is code for, "Are you okay to, make the trip and be here with us?" And he assured me that he was. And mind you, it was like 30 days after 9/11. So everybody was in a state of distress, and especially here in New York, which I had assumed he would have appreciated. So when he came and flew into my county airport and I went to pick him up, he was behaving erratically and screaming at me from the curb when I went to pull up to get him in the car. And I started to panic, and he waved me off and told me to drive around once and come back. And in the loop around, I was so freaked out that I could barely see straight. I mean, keep in mind, there were police everywhere, up and down the road and on the curbs. And I came around, I got him in the car, and I brought him to the house, and I just said, listen, I love you very much, but you should have told me you weren't feeling well. So I asked, I said, let's reschedule. And he reacted violently and very badly, and, was very mean to me verbally and asked me to call him a car. And I called him a car, and he disappeared into the depths of New York City. And really, honestly, that was really a decision I had to make for my own sanity and for the mental health of the rest of my family.
And
Not
that
an easy decision.
No, absolutely not for any family. And then 20 years pass, and you did wind up rekindling your relationship after he made his home here in South Bend, didn't you?
I did. I did. So round about 2019, my mother, who was starting to show signs of significant cognitive um, issues, um, I was feeling very badly about that. And I figured it was time to bury the hatchet. Many years had passed. I had nothing to lose. If I found him, then if he behaved badly, I would just say, I tried to find you and I tried to speak to you, and it's not going to work out. But I figured it was worth taking the risk, especially in light of the fact that I felt like I was, in the process of losing my mother emotionally as well. So I found him through Celeste Roche, who had been in touch with my brother Chuck a few times over the decade that I was not in touch with my father. And she immediately responded to me and she said, "Yes, I know who you are. And she went to Russ and asked him if he wanted to speak to me, and he said yes. So we initiated like an 18-month casual exchange of, three times a week phone calls. We exchanged Christmas gifts. He bought the kids gifts for Christmas and bought me flowers for Mother's Day. But unfortunately, as we came up to, the year and a half mark, the situation was starting to degrade. I started getting abusive phone calls in the middle of the night from him. If I didn't call him back immediately, um, he started exhibiting signs of being possessive and abusive on the phone and insisting that I speak to him exactly when he wanted me to speak to him. So I politely said, I just need a few weeks off, and let's rejoin. Let's just take a little time away and rejoin from there.
And you did wind up getting to see him before he passed away, did you not?
I did. I did. Also, with the help of Celeste Roche, basically she arranged a visit for my brother and I in the winter of 2023. We came to South Bend, me from New York and him from Boston. Um, Celeste met us at the nursing home. I believe it's called Bell Tower. We visited with my father for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I would describe it as pleasant. I mean, I think he was happy to see us. We were happy to see him. There was no contentious exchange during the visit. We just spoke about light things, and, I helped tidy up his room a little bit, and Celeste was there with her daughter. So I would describe that visit as something that Chuck and I definitely would have repeated because it went so well and it was so pleasant.
But then, on your way out, I understand there was some type of confrontation. Can you explain that?
Yes, on my way out, well, on our way out, sorry, we were at our respective cars, figuring out where we were going to go and have lunch. And all of a sudden, a woman who I had no idea who she was, came running out of the nursing home as if somebody had left something behind, like a cell phone or a coat. And she approached us. So it would have been Celeste, her daughter, myself, and my brother Chuck. And she approached us in a very aggressive manner and basically first said to Celeste, you're not even allowed to be here, because there's a restraining order against you. Now, I don't know. I was just standing there horrified that somebody was addressing us in this fashion. And then she turned to Chuck and I and basically said, you are not allowed to come back on this property. And we didn't. I mean, I was so stunned. I really didn't even have a response.
And in the end, you did not wind up going to your father's funeral service, but were you even invited to that funeral service?
No, neither my brother nor I were invited to any funeral service. We didn't know when it would be. Um, I did, in fact, get a phone call from the director of the funeral home, asking me to sign off on my father's cremation. And the funeral director asked me at the time, would you like me to send you some of his remains? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a really nice idea. How about you send me half, and I will, I will spread my father's ashes in a place that gave him, great solace and great happiness. So my brother, myself, his wife, and my husband went up to Boothbay Harbor, Maine last November, and we spread him around a number of places where we had frequented growing up as kids. And that meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to my brother. It would have meant a lot to my father. So in the end, Brian, I think despite all the years of hurtful behavior and regret, my brother and I came through with the help of Celeste. We came through and we did the right thing. We did the right thing by Russell. I feel good about it.
Now, you have described his years of mental illness. Do you think he was vulnerable to people taking advantage of him throughout those years?
Well, I tell you what, I can't speak really necessarily to the years that I wasn't with him, right?
Yeah.
But I could definitely speak to the number of years that I was with him, which was a lot of years. And I think after my mother worked up the courage to say enough is enough, and seeing his behavior, his fall off after she asked for the split, um, I definitely saw then a full dose over about 2 years' time of his self-harm behavior and destructive behavior in and around his own well-being. So during that time, I can absolutely say that he was not in a mental place to make sound and safe decisions for his own welfare.
Anything else you would like to say about your father, about your relationship, about this entire situation? I know it's been painful for you, but anything I didn't ask you?
Well, what I really want to say in closing, and then I would actually like to, if you would allow me to read his obituary that my husband actually wrote, and it's just beautiful. So I want to share it. I would like to say that Celeste and I have become friends since my father, since before my father passed, and certainly since he passed. And I think that's really been very helpful for both of us um, to move through the grieving period. And I think she's just been a really valuable part of his life for upward of 20 years. And she's been tried and true to him. And as a caretaker and as a friend, she's been loyal and there. Not somebody, in my opinion, who took advantage of him financially. Um, he paid her for work that she did for him, rightfully so. Um, and that's really it. I just think it was a hard, challenging life for my father, and yeah,
Understood. Difficult to talk about all of this. If you want to read part of that obituary, the floor is
I
yours.
would. It's not long. It's
Okay.
not long. You ready? I'm gonna tilt my head down and read, if
Oh,
that's okay.
that's fine.
Okay. You ready? Levering Russell Cartwright, a corporate attorney and long-term resident of South Bend, Indiana, passed away on October 8th, 2023 at the age of 83. He is survived by his daughter Anne, his son Charles, their respective spouses Colin and Victoria, and four grandchildren, Andrew, Matthew, Sarah, and Christopher. Russell was born in Evanston, Illinois on March 6, 1940, to Levering and Ruth Cartwright. He graduated from Harvard College in 1962 and Harvard Law School in 1965. Russ was a member of the Harvard Glee Club, where he honed his immense singing talent. He worked many years as a corporate attorney for the Household Finance Corporation. On December 31st, 1963, he married Abby Lynn Alt, a medical assistant and the love of his life. Sorry. On February 5th, 1965, and November 8th, 18th, 1967, respectively, he welcomed his two wonderful children, Anne and Chuck. His favorite place on this earth was the family cabin in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. He vacationed there each summer for decades with his wife, then children, and eventually spouses and his grandchildren. One of his favorite activities was spending time on the beach, often engaged total strangers in conversation. Clearing the brush around the cabin was another of his favorite pursuits. Newcomers staying at the cabin were often involuntarily drafted into this activity. Russell moved to South Bend in 1994, where he met his second wife, Erin, and her son, Alex. He also met many new friends. Celeste Roche and Dave Stahl were especially close, shared many, many memorable adventures with him, and remained at his side until he passed. Russell should be remembered for his generous spirit, intellectual curiosity, avid interest in classical music, history, and birds. Russ made friends easily. He was also a spiritual man and involved in many church activities, including singing for the choir and playing the trumpet. For those who attended his daughter Anne's wedding, all in attendance were floored by his rendition of Ave Maria. Thankfully, that memory has been preserved. He will be deeply missed by his friends, family, and all that knew him.
Ann Cartwright, I know this is not easy for you or your family, but thank you for taking the time. We appreciate your speaking with us and being open about your father's mental health challenges. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Well done, madam.